today the Feast of Epiphany, also Sunday this year. We'll be back here again in London. Wish you a happy Feast of Epiphany. And the epistle for this Feast of Epiphany, taken from the book of Isaiah, chapter 51. Arise and be enlightened, O Jerusalem, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and a mist the people. For the Lord shall arise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee. And the Gentiles shall walk in thy light, and kings in the brightness of thy rising. Lift up thy eyes round about and see. All these are gathered together. They are come to thee. Thy sons shall come from afar, and thy daughters shall arise up at thy side. Then shalt thou see and abound, and thy heart shall wonder and be enlarged, when the multitude of the sea shall be converted to thee. The strength of the Gentiles shall come to thee. The multitude of camels shall cover thee. The dromedaries of Madian and Ephah, and all they from Saba shall come, bringing gold and frankincense, and showing forth praise to the Lord. In the Gospel, Dave, now go to St. Matthew, chapter 2. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judah, in the days of King Herod, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to adore him. And the king Herod, hearing this, was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where Christ should be born. But they said to him, In Bethlehem of Judah. For so it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come forth the captain that shall rule my people Israel. Thus then Herod, privately calling the wise men, learned diligently of them the time of the star which appeared to them, and sending them into Bethlehem said, Go and diligently inquire after the child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I also may come and adore him. Who having heard the king went their way, and behold, a star which they had seen in the east went before them, until it came and stood over where the child was. And seeing the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And entering into this house, they found the child with Mary and his mother, and falling down, they adored him. And opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having received an answer in sleep, they should return to Herod, that they should not return to Herod. They went back another way into their own country. That's how the words of today's Holy Gospel. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, amen. To consideration of this great feast, the center of the Christmas season, and this mystery of Epiphany. Epiphany means that God shows himself. God shows himself, or it to be seen from above. And Jacobus Orogeny tells us that there are 4 epiphanies that we consider on this feast. The first is the coming of the wise men. The wise men that came, and the 3 kings that came to adore Christ and show that he was there, that God is here. The second, when the Lord was 30 years old, and he was baptized by St. John the Baptist, and a voice came from heaven and said, This is my beloved Son, hear ye him. And the Father's voice was heard, and God was manifested. And the third, when God manifested himself to his apostles, by performing the marriage feast in Cana, the conversion of the water into wine. And the fourth, when he manifested in a most sacred way that he is God in the desert, when he said, after he had fed the 5,000, and he said, my blood is drink indeed, my flesh is meat indeed. 4 sacred epiphanies, 4 levels of God showing forth himself. And you notice that at each level, there is a lesser number of souls who see the presence of God. And the very first one is the Magi. Now the word Magi, says Jacobus, remember it comes from the word magus. And magus means sorcerer or magician. And the magus that came, the Magi, the sorcerers and magicians, they were from the east, and their great-great-grandfather of at least one of the Magi, the great-grandfather perhaps of all of them, was Balaam, prophet. And Balaam, remember, was the wicked prophet. Balaam was the one who was paid to kill the Jews. He was paid to curse the God of the Jews because the king recognized, the wicked king of the people, recognized that it's the God of the Jews that brings victory to the Jews, and the only way to defeat the Jews was to defeat their God. And therefore he called on Balaam. Balaam the wicked prophet. Balaam the magician. Balaam the sorcerer. And he told Balaam, I will pay you to curse the Jews and curse the God of Israel, because I know that this people cannot be defeated by arms. They cannot be defeated in battle. They must be defeated by a spiritual war. And they will be defeated by being cursed. Therefore he commanded Balaam to curse. And Balaam said, there shall rise a star in the east. And he was the one that prophesied concerning the star. And hence, his great-great-grandsons knew about this star. And there was a custom amongst the sorcerers of the east that when they go up to a high mountain and look for this star, that one day the star of Balaam will come. And when that star has come, the great leader shall come, the great king shall come, who is going to be the great king of the world. And then over 1,000 years later, it was the time that Christ came. Now Balaam was a sorcerer. Notice this, says Jacobus. He is a sorcerer. He is a magician. And it was sorcerers and magicians, the sons of sorcerer and magicians, that looked for the star. And notice that they are the ones that knew the time. They are the ones that knew the time. But they did not know the place where Christ would be. We're in such a time right now that there are many people that know throughout the world this is the time. Right now in the early 20th, 21st century, down to early 2019, it is a time when God is going to show himself in his wrath. It is a time that there is going to be some kind of chastisement from heaven. It's a time in which we may be near the end. Even the movies and the stories of the last 10 years about the end of the world, about end of the world type of events, about great troubles and great difficulties, global crises. Those that are the magicians of the world, those that are the magi, the magus, they know the time of God's coming. And yet when we look at Israel, the chosen people, and look now in the New Testament, and what do we see? The Catholics. The Catholics have forgotten the time. But they know the place. And hence we discover these magi, they see a star, and they finally find the star. This is the star. He has come now. And so the magi know he has come now. Now these magi, they are the descendants of Balaam, but they are also kings. And they also are wise men, for they are not as wicked as their father Balaam, but they are his descendants. And they are false prophets, and they are pagans, and they are not the wonder followers of the true religion. And yet they know Christ is near. Christ has come. Let us go and find him. This is the way it was 2,000 years ago at the first coming of Christ. How is it now that we are near the second coming? We are not yet at the end of the world, but we are at the time. We're at the time when Christ is coming, and God is coming, and the world knows it. Young people know, I must do something There's something wrong with the world, and I have to do something, and sacrifice must be made because God is coming. God is coming. But they don't know what he is. They don't know who he is. So the Magi did not know where the king was. But immediately they followed the star. They got on their dromedaries, their camels, and they followed the star. They immediately followed the star because they saw the star has come. And now the star was visible to all. But they did not all see the sign. Just as we see, for instance, right now, one of the great mysteries in the church today, there are many pagans, pagan magi, pagan sorcerers, pagan wise men. For they are sorcerers and they are also wise men, the wise men of the world. That there are pagan wise men who have discovered, for instance, that the sedimentary rock on the highest mountains, the Himalayas and the Alps and the Rocky Mountains and the Andes, these rocks are all made of sedimentary rock which can only form by water, and that this water, inside of them there are seashells and fossils which could only be formed by a great flood event that covered the entire world, and hence they say there must have been a worldwide flood that happened at the same time. But they don't know Christ. They don't know the Catholic Church. But they know that God has showed himself in the rocks. And others, the scientists looked at the shroud, didn't believe in God. But he studied the shroud because he was required to do so in the 1970s. And he said, I'll study this foolish thing, this ridiculous thing. And he discovered the shroud, and he said, this is only explainable by God. This is a perfect representation of a perfect man who died on the cross, who was scourged and crowned with thorns, who with a great light impressed his image in a miraculous way on this cloth. And it is a perfect photographic negative that was made 2,000 years ago by the power of light, mixing with his blood and creating a representation of absolute perfection that in modern photography and modern technology we still can't do. This came from heaven. And we are finding scientists, some of them, finding wise men, magi, sorcerers, finding also those that have given themselves over to the devil. They are beginning to see Christ is here. There is a star. There is a sign. There is a sign of God's coming, but they don't know where to go. Now this is the first Epiphany. Now the Magi came, and they followed the star. Now note this, says St. Augustine, when they arrived at the Holy Land, the star disappeared. And they didn't see the star anymore. And they arrived, and they said, well, let us go to Jerusalem. Why go to Jerusalem, says St. Augustine? Because Jerusalem is the place of the kings. Jerusalem is the place of the priests. Jerusalem must be the place where the great king is going to be born. So at least the star led us to Israel. Now let us go to Jerusalem. And so likewise today, there are many souls. One of which, for instance, I met this last year. Brother Nathaniel. Brother Nathaniel, the famous brother on the internet, the Jewish convert to the Orthodox faith, who converted to the Orthodox faith, and not Catholic, and because he was a Jew who realized there was something wrong with the Judaism, and the Judaism is bad, and he realized that he must go to Christ. The first place he went was the Catholic Church. He told me, I went to the Catholic Church. That's where he went. The star led him to the Catholic Church, just like the star led the three kings to Israel. And then they went to Jerusalem. And Brother Nathaniel went to the Catholic Mass. Not Mass, the Catholic sacrilege. The non-Catholic Protestant sacrilege called the New Mass. And he told me, he went in. I went into that new church. He had no problem with the new Mass. He didn't think it was particularly bad, but it didn't interest him. And he looked at that new Mass and he saw it and said, well, yeah, I don't like it. I'm not saying it's bad, coming from Judaism, coming from my background, and coming from paganism and the outside world, but I don't like it. There's got to be something better than that. And then he went to an Orthodox church. And he said, when I walked into the Orthodox church, I saw the vestments. I saw the incense. I heard the sacred language. I said, this is like my Jewish heritage. He recognized that the God of the New Testament He is the same God as the God of the Old Testament. And that if there is a God who is the same God, there should be something of the Old Testament in the New Testament. There should be something the Jew should recognize. And he recognized the holy vestments. And he recognized the incense. And he recognized the presence of Christ. And instead of becoming a Catholic, he became an Orthodox monk. He should have been a Catholic. What's the problem? He went to Jerusalem. What's the problem today? You want to go to the truth? Don't go to Rome. Bad town. But we know that the Catholic Church is centered in Rome, as the true Jewish religion is centered in Jerusalem. And so they went to Jerusalem. The modern Magi go to Rome. And when they arrive in Rome, they talk to the king. They said, the king is coming. He is not coming. It's the time of the Holy Ghost. Everything, this is the time of renewal. Don't you see it? I mean, the churches are closing everywhere. Kids are being aborted everywhere. Everybody's getting divorced. Everybody's leaving the church. The average age of a Catholic is 165, and the priests are homosexuals, and and there's murder going everywhere. Everybody's getting divorced. It's great. I mean, these are wonderful times. That doesn't sound right. But they went to the right church, as the Magi went to Jerusalem in the first manifestation. And the Magi came to Jerusalem, and they went into Jerusalem, and the modern Magi come to the Catholic Church. So many that are now Protestants. In India, for instance, the Indians are really strict. They're really tough. They're stubborn. They're quite stubborn. And so the Hindu says, I want to become a Christian. I want to become a Catholic. And in Varanasi, at the Cathedral of Varanasi, the Rome of Hinduism, of about 5,000 or more than that, many thousand, 10,000 people or more going to the cathedral. Over 8,000 of them are Hindus. And they want to become Catholic. Well, because Varanasi is the center of Hinduism, and the place where also Buddha, King Buddha lived, and Buddhism began, they will not let them become Catholic, and they will not baptize them. And so they try to become Catholic, and they try to become Catholic, and they try to become Catholic. And the bishop and the priest refuse. And finally, in disgust, they go and find a Protestant minister and say, we want to get baptized. And they baptize them, and they become Protestants. But they first go to Jerusalem. They first go to Rome. And the Magi went to Rome, and they said the king is being born. And Herod said, what king? I'm the king. But there was a king that's been prophesied for several thousand years. We heard about it over 1,000 years ago from our grandpa, and he didn't like you. Our grandpa was Balaam, and he hated you, and he was bad, and he knew about your king. What happened to your ancestors? Did they forget? I guess they did. So then Herod, not being a religious man, he called the priest and said, the king is coming. And they said he's going to be born somewhere in Israel. Where is he supposed to be born? And they said, well, I don't know, because I did a Vatican II seminary. I don't know, because I studied in a neo-catechumenal way. I don't know, because I did the RCIA program, where you learn anything except for anything about Christ, anything about the church. An average Jew that was 5 years old should know that the Messiah is going to be the son of David, and he's going to be born in Bethlehem. But the great theologians didn't know. So they had to pull out all their PhDs, and they had to look in all their books. Oh yeah, it says right that he's going to be born in Bethlehem. And they came back, yes, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. And we looked it up. Fools. And then the king of the Jews, the human king, and the priests, they were all disturbed. They should not be disturbed. But they were very disturbed because they weren't ready for the king. Here we find that the Magi, the sons of Balaam, and the sons of pagans, they are ready for the king, and they have been wicked. And the sons of David and the sons of Abraham, they are not ready. But God shows himself. And he tells David, Herod then tells the kings, all right, you go. Inquire diligently about the child. Come back to me. Come back to me. Come back to the priests. And tell us that where he is, and we will come and adore him. All you have to do is go and then come back. What would happen if they come back? They would be killed, and the child would be killed. Just like today in our modern church. The more things change, the more they remain the same. And it turns out Solomon was so right. There's nothing new under the sun. And so just like today in our holy church, what happens if we go to Rome? What happens if we go back and tell the Romans, he's really here. We want you to know that he's here. He's really our friends. We want you to know that the Latin Mass is better than the New Mass. We want to put the Latin Mass beside the New Mass. We want to put tradition beside modernism. We want people to understand tradition the same way as understand modernism, and surely people are going to choose tradition. 30 years later, they have the same thinking. 33 years later. 33 years later, Pilate said, surely if I put Jesus Christ on a stage, and I put Barabbas, whom everyone hates, on a stage, the good people, they're going to choose Barabbas. And they're not going to choose. They're going to choose Christ, and they're going to choose Barabbas to be crucified. They're not going to choose a Barabbas over Christ. They're going to choose Christ over Barabbas. It's obvious. We all know that, because they're all just good people. Have times changed? Not much. It turns out that the people did choose Barabbas over Christ. And it turns out that if the three kings did go back, what would have happened? They would be dead. They would never return to their own country to tell their people that the king is here. They never return to their own country to tell the people that we have found the true God and we have adored him, and you also must adore him. And as we have abandoned the religion of paganism and accepted the true religion of the Messiah, so you must also accept it. And the people were waiting for the three kings to come back. They would never return. They would never become saints. And Christ would be dead. And therefore, it is the same today. We don't return to modernist Rome. We don't return to King Herod, who said, diligently inquire about whether or not the Latin Mass is approved. Benedict XV diligently inquired. And he said it was never abrogated. Isn't that wonderful? He diligently inquired. And they checked all the books, and sure enough, it was never abrogated. He's our friend. The friend of Satan, yes. The friend of hell, yes. The friend of God, no. It's a lie. Just as Herod was so kind with those three kings. But what a kind king. He's more kind than our major king where we're come from. What a kind king. And these priests, they were so diligent looking up in their books. Three pagans knew immediately that the king had come, and the others did not. And the three pagans followed the star. But what about the Jews? They didn't follow the star. They didn't follow it. And so they went. And what did they do? It was three pagan kings who would be the first ones to prostrate in adoration of Jesus Christ. They were the first to show that this man is the King of kings and the Lord of lords. And they brought gifts. The shepherds didn't bring gifts. But these three kings brought gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And they brought the gifts, and they adored him as the King of kings. Now, the first manifestation was a manifestation of kings, manifestation of the lords of the world, that all might know. This may impress all men. Behold, this man really is the Messiah, because kings came. And they came from the Orient. They came from far away to adore him. And therefore it easily makes it easier for us to accept the faith. And that's the first manifestation. The second manifestation, and this manifestation is to all men, pagans and Catholics alike. The second manifestation is only to those that have the faith. That is, those who have the true faith, those that are Jews in the Old Testament, those that are Catholics in the New. Those that have gotten into the church. This manifestation is St. John the Baptist when he baptizes our Lord, and the voice comes from heaven. When the voice comes from heaven, "This is my beloved Son, hear ye him." They heard the voice of God. It was a great miracle to hear God's voice. They heard the voice of God, and then they believed, many of them. And the second manifestation, that all could hear, the good and bad Catholics alike. So likewise, we can hear the teaching of our holy church. We can hear that there are 10 commandments. We can hear that there are 7 sacraments and 6 precepts of the church. We can hear the 12 articles of the creed. We can hear the teaching of how to live according to the gospel. All good and bad can hear it. Those who are of the faith know what is required to be pleasing to God. This is my beloved Son. Hear ye him. And we know that it's God speaking because we have the supernatural faith. But God has not yet penetrated the hearts. And hence the third manifestation. And this is the one that takes place in the marriage feast of Cana. For some will follow Christ and walk with him. And these walk with him, and then one day he goes to a marriage feast. And they arrive at the marriage feast, and he turns water into wine. And they alone see the miracle. They see the miracle, for he worked this miracle in the presence of his apostles. And why did he do this? To show them his strength, and to encourage them to have a strong faith, that he might show his divine divinity in a special way inside of the apostles, so that they can go out and be apostles carrying his divinity to the world. And then the fourth manifestation. 5,000. And this is the great test. The other 3 are preparations for this great test. He fed the 5,000 with bread. And the day afterwards he said, my flesh is meat indeed. My blood is drink indeed. Eat my flesh, drink my blood, and you shall have life in you. But how can this be? We are not cannibals. And he does not explain. He does not explain. He says, you accept me as God. Yesterday you were so happy. Yesterday you firmly believed. Yesterday you wanted to make me king. Why? Because of the bread. I am letting you know that I am not a king for that bread. I am the bread. And you must eat me. Don't eat that bread and call yourself my followers. Don't sit on the grass and eat the bread and call yourself my followers. Don't try to make me king and call yourself my followers. You must eat my flesh. You must drink my blood. But we don't understand. This is cannibalism. Please explain. Let me repeat. Unless you eat my flesh, unless you drink my blood, you shall not have life in you. This is crazy. Let me repeat it again. Eat my flesh, drink my blood. And they left him. They left. 20,000 people. They left. They left. They left. They were disgusted. And there were 12 apostles. They also did not understand. And then our Lord turned to him and said, all right, everyone else left. Will you leave me also? Will you? And then St. Peter said in the name of all the apostles, except Judas. And this is made clear by John the Apostle. He spoke in the name of 11. Before he spoke in the name of 12. But this day he could not speak in the name of 12, but only in the name of 11. And hence St. John the Apostle noticed Judas the betrayer was there. Judas the traitor was there because he no longer is with the apostles, though he's physically with them. He no longer believes. He is disgusted, and he will not be undisgusted. And his heart is turned away from God, and he has become a traitor on this day. He will not actually take the silver and the gold, the 30 pieces of silver, until a year and a half later. But he betrayed this day. He left Christ this day. But then the other 11 did not. And Peter said in the name of the 11, not the 12, Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou alone hast the words of eternal life. He appeared to all the world and showed his great divinity by creating it. He showed his great divinity by wiping out all of the world and leaving only 8 alive. And shortly after, their children forgot about the punishment of God. And they wandered off into false religions. And then he had to divide them at the Tower of Babel. He chose a chosen race. And by the time he came, they forgot about him. But what did he do? He's still going to make sure his divinity is known and loved in the human heart, and known and loved by men, and manifested inside of us. And hence he's after that manifestation. Who can believe in me? Who can follow me in trials? Who can believe in me and follow me in the time of the great tribulation? For he who perseveres unto the end shall be saved. And hence these tests of trials in the church. How many centuries have had tests? We can only speak for the last 6,000 years. Each of them has been a year of trial. Every century since the time of Christ has been a century of trial. Every saint has had to go through trials and tribulations. Every Catholic who is faithful must go through trials and tribulations. Why is this? So that we might really see God did show himself to the Magi, and we know he's God. He did speak, and we know it's God that speaks. And he did perform miracles, and we know there were miracles that strengthen our faith. And in the time of trials, when we can't see the miracles, in the time of trials when we can't remember all the teachings, in the time of trials when we don't understand everything, in the time of trials, persevere. In the time of trials, have faith in Christ. In the time of trials, keep walking. And God shows himself in every age, in all these four ways. And hence the divine Epiphany. So in any case, let us follow Christ and see him in all things. God bless you all. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.